Stephen. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Listen.Better podcast. Really excited to be chatting to you. I know you're an extremely busy man with all the different things that you get up to. So hopefully in the next 20 minutes, we'll start to delve into a bit more behind who is Stephen Waddington, what makes you tick. So let's start right at the beginning. Who have been the major influences in your life?
So undoubtedly, Annabelle, it's family, and that would have to be my mother and my grandfather. My grandfather, first off, hugely inspirational character. Generation that worked through the war years. He trained as an engineer. He had a huge appetite and curiosity for life. Wonderful, wonderful man. Very, very generous personality. His daughter, my mother, inherited a lot of his traits. And similar attitude and energy for life, and I guess that the two of them are the fundamentally have the biggest impact on my life. Just the generosity and energy and spirit and openness, really.
Interesting. I love that word curiosity. Clearly very key in the communications sector. Bringing us right up to date, we've had an extraordinary couple of years, the pandemic. Can you tell me some perhaps highlights and lowlights, what it's taught you and how you responded?
It's been awakening for all of us, hasn't it? I think in aspects of our professional and personal life. I'd never spent so much time at home ever in my life. Never spent so much time with my partner previously, and so with that there's had to be adaptations. We've come out of it strongly, thank God, but we really have, and then professionally as well. I've been through huge changes. So at the outset of the pandemic, I was managing an agency. I launched a professional advisory service, just fortuitously spotting an opportunity through my own curiosity. Again, my granddad's trait. Professional advisory service. I developed with my wife a business, a training business, community interest group. We can maybe talk about that. And then I've embarked on a PhD. And there's sort of a circle to all those things related to personal and professional development. So starting my own professional advisory service, helping people that have been along the journey that I've been on, or along the way of the journey that I've been on, in starting agencies, developing their craft and skill and turning that into a business. That's been hugely enriching and rewarding. And because of the time and the period we've been in, we've seen comms, our function, elevated within organizations. And I've done some work variously for the Government Communication Service and the NHS to kind of explore that and what's happened. And that's led to my PhD at Leeds Business School, which is going to continue look at the conditions that have enabled this to happen and where that might take us with lessons for the future.
You've got a lot on your plate, I can tell. Let's jump back to the sociallymobile.org, so the social enterprise you've co-founded with your wife.
Yeah, so Sarah, again, a bit like my mother and grandfather, has huge energy, huge appetite for life. We both held variously positions within the industry, within the trade association and the Chartered Institute, and had access to, data points within the industry to see some of the firsthand the systemic issues that we face. And diversity is a big one. We're both from socially diverse working class backgrounds. Both of us were funded by the council, our local councils at the time, to go through university, and have been helped along the way through our careers by various sponsors and advocates, I guess. And education and learning has been, for both of us, a huge part of our careers. My wife's hugely focused on self-development, in the same way that I am, although me a little bit more academic, much more practical. And we spotted this. There's this inflection point in our industry where you shift from being a very good practitioner and having great competency in a craft to having to manage people. So suddenly you're faced with a P&L, you're faced with numbers, you're faced with having to manage teams. And these are skills you're not taught. You just, there isn't an intervention to help you through that unless you're working for an organization that is particularly focused on professional development and helps you through that. Now, if you look at the diversity issues we face within the industry, at the same time, there's this issue in helping colleagues from socioeconomic, from diverse backgrounds, from underrepresented communities, get those skills. It's even more acute. So we put the two things together and we developed this exec education program. So Sarah's through COVID, her thing was she did a number of courses with INSEAD and Oxford SciEd, and we borrowed that model of sort of 10-week exec education courses and applied it to this specific intervention between the craft practitioner and manager director role, and created Socially Mobile. And yesterday, the first cohort finished, and we've had 20 students since January working through this 10-week exec education course. We work with an incredible community, brought together this incredible community of teachers, so leaning into our network and getting people to help create the content for it. Also examiners and markers and supporters. We've built this community of around 50 people who support the infrastructure of Socially Mobile, and it's just been hugely rewarding. It's really early in the process, so the first cohort only just finished. We've got the second cohort open, and applications are looking good. But already we're seeing the softer skills of networks and confidence emerge amongst the candidates who are, clearly they're quite noisy, actually, surprisingly noisy on social media about what they're learning and, reporting on their individual journeys.
Congratulations on what sounds a fantastic initiative, Stephen. I understand that there are fully funded places as well, so that it's a no barriers entry.
Oh yeah, agencies, employers can come to us and pay for places on the platform to put candidates through, and the hope is it will become half and half, so it becomes self-funding. At the moment, we're funding it through our own businesses and raising sponsorship, and the industry is incredibly generous in providing support for it. We're completely funded for this year, and so hopefully it'll become self-fulfilling.
It'll be really interesting to see the path of those that have completed the 10 weeks to see, because we've got this quite talent shortage. So is this giving them an extra string to their bow when they go forward for jobs to have completed your course? So I'll be watching with interest.
Well, me too, Annabelle. When it's one of the things I'm really keen to do, to follow the journey of candidates through through the next 5 years, and we're committed to doing that.
Fantastic. Back to your work with Wadds Inc., launched during the pandemic. I read with interest that you have a manifesto based on perhaps life lessons, 8 of them, I think you list. Yeah. Can you share a couple of those with me, which stand out for you?
Yeah, do you know what? In previous roles, in running my agencies, my own agencies, I've got hung up on capitalistic notions of creating value. So focused on driving profit and driving growth to the extent that it has led to sacrifices in my personal life. And so the key one, I guess, is creating sustainable businesses that support the founders. So all the organizations I work with are independent businesses. And some of them are incredibly fast growth, incredibly profitable, but also fundamentally all of them are looking to for the founder is looking to create a sustainable lifestyle, so the business works around that lifestyle. Unfortunately, we're living at a time when you can do that, and structures are much more fluid than they have been, certainly when I was in the early part of my career, and so different ways of work, culture and society is open to different ways of working, and so that's a great thing. So sustainability is a really big one for me.
Okay, and then close second, perhaps, representation of community, I noticed.
Communities are a big thing, right? I run a couple of communities. I run a community for agency founders. I run a community for on Facebook that I actually built during lockdown, and that's kind of, it's a bit of a sandpit. It's a bit of a place to test ideas. It's hugely rich resource when I'm thinking through aspects of my PhD. And the PhD process is, I'm in a particularly challenging part of it at the moment, trying to adapt to academic ways of learning from practice, and finding it quite tough actually. But the community around me is hugely supportive, and very, very responsive when when I ask and seek for help, and that's good. So yeah, community in the terms of providing a supportive environment and an environment for learning, but also community, I guess, in this sense that the public relations profession should represent the public that it looks to serve, and socially mobile is one way of doing that, through addressing the diversity of issues in our profession, but also we've got to think much wider and much more openly.
Very good. I'm interested, you talk a lot about the people you've gathered around you, the communities, both in socially mobile and during your PhD. Do you think that's how you lead? Is that your leadership style, to bring people in, to help them feel empowered and to make decisions for themselves? Describe a bit more your leadership.
It's empowering me. I think it's empowering me. It's a completely two-way street, Annabelle. It totally is. I think I'm collegiate. But at the same time, I also lead to the front, read from the front. I've learned through my career that humility is a really important aspect of leadership. I used to be an egotistical monster. My wife would still say I still am. She marks all my work. Actually, marks all my work. We review each other's work constantly, which is an incredible way of learning, actually. But it's also really tough. Because your fiercest critic is also your partner, and I think that sort of self-examination and humility to be open is the way I learn, the way I develop. And I think it's the through working with students, working with teams, working with businesses, working with agencies. It's also the way I think people through empowerment develop them the quickest.
So, speaking honestly, and I haven't prepared this question with you, but do you ever have days where you just want to throw everything in and just head off to a deserted beach? How's your energy for all of this that you're juggling at the moment?
Do you know what? I had a really shit day yesterday because an issue arose within one of the communities I manage, and related to Ukraine and providing support. Practitioners providing support to Ukraine, and it developed into quite a thorny discussion. And yeah, I had a couple of times yesterday about my head in my hand saying, "What do I really want to spend my life managing? Pissed off people on Facebook?" And clearly, I don't. And so that sort of thing is challenging. But I just walk away for a period of time and self-reflect. And come back to it, and that's kind of what I do. Yeah. In my personal life, I do that as well. You've got to have time out, and so I've learned you've got to have time out and find time to reflect and solve a situation. Realize that sometimes the silence is best.
Wise words indeed. So if you were to take all the learning that you've had over, I won't say how many decades, and revisit your 18-year-old self, a question I love to ask, what would you tell?
Yes, great question. So absolutely great question. So two things. Listening is really important. And that's probably the most underrated aspect of communication, I think. It also sounds quite cliche, doesn't it? But truly listening and being present in the moment to understand somebody, a perspective, through my own personal learning. I've got a pile of papers here on my table, listening in terms of reading and trying to understand the voices from the past and what they tell us about the future. That's the third thing. So listening. Second thing is emotion, I guess, just understanding your own personal emotion. And you kind of touched on it in that last question. what happens? How do you manage your emotion? I used to be a very angry person, and angry about so many different issues, and that was just me internalizing issues and not dealing with them properly. And I think coming to terms with that, I had a big moment in my late 30s, early 40s, where I came to terms with that. And that was a breakthrough, if you like, in my life. So now I'm completely got the other end of the spectrum, and I blub and cry, and I still get pissed off and angry, but I manage it.
That's so interesting, and I have to admit that a couple of decades ago, I probably wouldn't have wanted to have crossed paths with you, if I'm being really honest, because I'm a real empath. I sense stuff. And when I met you at a recent, I'm going to be very chummy now, I met you at a recent networking event. I think I mentioned to you, I just feel there was something very different about you. You've gone through some sort of transformation. So it's really interesting to hear you admit that, and that's the journey you've been on. And I think a lot of leaders perhaps are experiencing that. And I think pandemic for some has really accelerated that self-introspection. What's really important? How am I treating others? What am I giving off?
Yeah, undoubtedly, I was an egotistical monster at the start of my career, driven by capitalistic values, and I was screwed up, fucked up. In terms, retrospectively looking back at the time, I thought I was doing the best I possibly could, and probably didn't know much different. Certainly didn't know any different. And the people around me, actually, who were supporting me, mentoring me, were all pushing me in that direction, and it's horrible. It's horrible. And so now it's partly, I think the COVID has created a space for self-awareness and self-reflection. But this journey's been, 30 odd years for me, for sure.
Really interesting. Well, we're going to wrap up there, because I know you've got a lot on your plate to get back to, but thank you so much for taking time today, Stephen. Real pleasure, and hope to see you in real life in the coming weeks and months, perhaps. Thanks so much.
Annabelle.
Have a great rest of the day.